Welcome back. In this last video, I'm going to focus on the second question Wendy posed, which was, what's the take-home message for aspiring advocates? And it's, of course, really important to bring us all back to these questions. What does this mean for me? What does this mean for librarians and others who care about libraries? And how can we apply this research? Okay, so here I'll pull together my experience as a researcher and as a public library leader. I'm going to make a couple of main points, and then I'll bring in my own examples from my past work successes. So my abbreviated review of my study really shows that both the influence tactics of authority and consistency and commitment were really readily apparent in my coding, but a really more thorough analysis showed that the processes which were successful were also very highly dependent on the tactic of liking. So more than any other tactic, interview participants acknowledged that this concept of relationship building was present in their work to advance requests within government, and that was whether they were talking about library funding or other non-library related issues as well. So important and stable personal networks highlighted in my study were also most often created over lengthy periods of time. So just as my study revealed what might work, we need to consider those efforts that might be less than helpful as well. So a discussion of this idea of scarcity really stands out as well. The concept of something being more valued if there's a threat of its disappearance was really intentionally covered in my interviews, and it was really clearly understood by all the participants, and none felt this was a factor of influence in the decision-making process for public library budgets. Of course, like anything, complexity exists in this analysis of the tactics of influence. There was a possibility of ranking the tactics in terms of their use, but I don't really think that ranking them is a reflection of overall effectiveness. So influence theory generally, beyond this framework, recognizes that the effectiveness of specific tactics is really context dependent. And also, as I noted earlier, that there was crossover in some of those tactics too. It couldn't be analyzed in a completely discrete way. So in other words, the effectiveness of one tactic might depend on how it intersects with another. So what does this mean in a library setting? And I know you're going to be hearing from some people with excellent experiences in this course. So this is just my 2 cents about how I've seen this play out. So let's say, for example, you're not happy with a funding decision. Maybe it affects a specific program you know is well liked by your library patrons, and a decrease in funding feels like it's hurting those who most need it. So you decide to take action and call up the media, maybe the local newspaper, talking about the resulting reduction in service to patrons, how availability of collections and hours might be curtailed, and the negative effect of this decision generally. Okay, so just let me pause for a moment here. I'm describing a setting I've seen play out a few times in my career, but to be honest, I've never called the media to complain, but I have been part of programs where others have done this. And here's the outcome. Here's one setting. The politician at the receiving end of this kind of campaign brought it up to me 11 years after it happened, and it wasn't in a positive way. The link of how he may have been responsible for any of this was still very real to him, and that's pretty important to public libraries 11 years later. Now, let me talk about another setting that I think shows this complexity, but in a positive way. You certainly have heard by now how important I've been saying relationship building is in being a successful advocate. So while I was involved with a committee building a new recreation center, of course I wanted the best for the library in question at that time. And so do you think a librarian new to the area can parachute in to a committee full of politicians and other local decision makers who've lived their whole lives in the area? And in fact, I mean, their families have lived in those areas for centuries. They spent many years hoping to improve services to local citizens, and who also really love to play hockey. Do you think someone like me can suggest a library is as important as a rink in those circumstances? Right? Not. So in that case, I was able to draw on an existing relationship I had with one of the heads of a recreation department who's also on the committee, and who, like everyone else on that committee, was part of a family who'd been there for centuries. She'd known these people her whole life. Um, and she and I had worked together on other projects prior to this, and we learned that we share a passion for being on the ice as well. Though for me, it's on a pair of speed skates, not hockey skates. So over the months that our committee met, she and I became closer, and she became a real champion of the library cause. And I'm very happy to report that that new library has just opened in that particular rec center. So some parting words. I'll just say, libraries, public libraries really are facing difficult decisions. It's uncertain times. And our ability to get favorable responses to requests for increases might require a different approach than we really thought about in the past. I think creating meaningful connections with individuals in many communities across all levels of government should really be emphasized as a key to success. And as Cialdini himself, the influence theorist, declared when discussing the most effective tactics for influence, he said the relationship is the message. So that's the end of my video presentation. I'd be happy to answer questions online.